But what we did in Kilimanjaro, there's 4 of us, and they charge you for each day you're on the mountain. I'm talking about a long time ago. So we figured if we climbed it very quick, we'd have more money for beer. So we climbed this thing stupidly quick. And of course, we all had altitude sickness. Got to the top and scarpered down, but we had lots of beer in the bottom. My name's David Hempleman-Adams, and all my life I've been in industry, but in my part-time I've done quite a bit of adventure. Purely through school, when I was about 13 years old, I had a PE master who was Welsh, and he worked out if he could take all these lads down to the Black Mountains down in southern Wales, he could get a week's free because his mother lived down there. So he used to take us down, put us in a big old army tent and let us out on the hills. That was the start of seeing mountains for the first time, seeing mist coming out of the mountains. So it was a thing that I'll never forget, and it was something that stayed with me for the rest of my life. As I got more experience, I used to hitchhike up to the Lake District and other places, and then used to hitchhike out to the Alps, which used to take a few days. And we couldn't afford to stay in huts or anything like this or use cable cars, so we used to walk up and sleep outside of a hut and then do a climb the following day. And I certainly couldn't do it now, even with a cable car up. Well, the Grand Slam has actually slightly changed over the years, but because I was first and I set up the Grand Slam, I suppose, it's climbing the highest mountain on each continent. So you have obviously Everest for Asia, the Australian plate, you've got Elbrus, which is Europe, Kilimanjaro, Africa, Denali, which we used to call McKinley in Alaska, Aconcagua in South America, and of course Vincent, which is the remotest and coldest down in Antarctica. And then on top of that, what I actually did was the north and south magnetic poles, and then followed that up with the geographical north and south poles. Subsequently, some people have just done the last 60 miles to the north and south pole, whereas I did it all the way from land to the North Pole and all the way from the sea all the way up to the South Pole. People have slightly amended it. Well, in those days, there wasn't even a thing called the 7 Summits, which was climbing the highest mountain on each continent. And so we just went along on our merry way, climbing these things. And certainly a lot of mountains which weren't the 7 Summits, and certainly routes in the Alps that aren't on the 7 Summits, and much more difficult mountains than the ones on the 7 Summits. So no, it never absolutely occurred to me at all. And then I was down on Aconcagua doing it in winter, and I came across Rebecca Stevens and her boyfriend. And she said, "Oh, I'm doing the 7 Summits." And by which time I'd actually had my 7 Summits, and I said, "Well, what's this?" She gave me the idea of the 7 Summits, and then I went on. I was doing Arctic as well, polar stuff by that time. But what happened was I failed on the North Pole eventually, nearly 3 times. So my last little bit for that Explorers Grand Slam was the North Pole. I failed in the year before 97, went back in 98. With Runa Geldness, and finally went from land to the North Pole, and that was the end of the Grand Slam. But by that time, there was a couple of other people who had woken up to the idea. There was a guy called Fyodor Konnikov, and I raced him to the South Pole, and he beat me. So it was a close run thing. So when we failed in 97, I thought, oh goodness. And so it was very, very lucky that we were fortunate to do it in 98, and that gave me the Grand Slam. That was by far the biggest mountain we'd ever attempted. And we were in the States then, working in a summer camp for wealthy young kids and teaching them climbing and things like that. And then after the camp, we hitchhiked up to Alaska actually. And in those days, you could, these people used to have these CB radios, and they would radio overhead, And so we did it remarkably in a very, very short time. So went all the way up. And there were very few people then climbing it. It was the end of the season. So we were fit and we were stupid. And so we climbed it very, very fast. And my friend got a little bit of altitude sickness, but that was our very, very first big mountain. And we were actually, in retrospect, we were extraordinarily lucky to have got away with it. Both trips were solo. In those days, all the big expeditions that went to the North Pole were hugely sponsored by either governments or very wealthy people. And because they used to use dogs or snowmobiles. And for that, you have to use or drop fuel or dog food. So it was hugely expensive. And I found, when you did the research, there was no correlation between the success and the amount of money that you put in. And at that time, there was a guy called Mesner, who, first of all, he climbed Everest without oxygen. And a lot of people poo-pooed it and said, no, you didn't do it without oxygen and all the rest of it. And so amazingly, and this was a really eye-opener for me, a really important point in my life, he went back to the north side of Everest, climbed it solo and without oxygen. And I thought, well, there you go. He didn't do it with big teams or anything else. So I thought, right, I'm going to try and do the same thing to the North Pole solo without all this dogs or snowmobiles and all this supplies. And I tried it, and it was a failure, but I learned a lot from it. And on all the things I've tried to do and I failed on a lot of things, but always try and learn and improve things. So when I went back to the magnetic pole, I put a lot of those things which I'd learned into practice, and actually was the first person then to have gone to the magnetic North Pole solo. The solo ones, it doesn't matter if it's climbing or Arctic or flying. The solo ones is you've got to make your own decisions. You're on the line, so if anything goes wrong, it's your fault, and you can't blame anyone else. But there is behind that probably more satisfaction when you've succeeded. But I do also really love going away with a bunch of mates. And that's fantastic. If a lot of my friends I've gone away with on lots of different expeditions, and that comradeship, you can't beat in industry or in a normal day job, and it's very hard to explain. But when you've got some great friends and you're skiing away at the end of the day and you've made some good progress and it's a good crack in the tent, you can't beat it. So I do enjoy both. And we've done some great things, and I say we as teams. And also actually, when you come down to it, on all my solo trips, be it again aviation or polar, it still needs a team. You need backup to look after you. So I always say we, because it's not just a solo. I might be out in front, but it just takes a big team. And I'm always very, very mindful of giving always them the credit for helping. It's changed out of all comparison. So when I did it in '93, we did it post-monsoon, not pre-monsoon, which is a big difference. And there was only 2 other teams on the mountain when we were on it, and only 10 of us got to the summit in that post-monsoon period. And so then the Nepalese kept a very, very strict control of the permits and the number of teams. So it was a very small number of people who ever climbed it. And in those days, there was a 10% success and 10% death rate. I was incredibly lucky, a nice team, but I was incredibly lucky to have got to the top. And to this day, still good friends with a lot of the guys, and also with the Sirdar, who was Natemba Sherpa, and I used him on the north side when I took a big team to the north side. So he was the main Sirdar there. And I brought him back to England. Again, I want to give him a bit of credit because he helped me get to the top. I remember standing on the top, and there was just the 2 of us on the top, looking around, doing a 360, thinking, this is fantastic. And I remember taking an ice screw from the top, put it in my pocket. And when I got home, I went down to that old PE master who retired, a guy called Mansell James. I went to his home and gave him this ice screw from the summit of Everest and said, I would never have got there without your help. I've only gone twice. I've went from the south side in '93 and I led a big team on the north side in 2011. And that was slightly different. In '93 I was just a climber, fit young climber. So, it was a dog eat dog and try and get to the top. Whereas as a team leader, it was a completely different thing. And I never actually intended to go to the summit in 2011. And because I was much older and the Natemba was a lot older as a Sherpa. So we were just going up. Oxygen systems had changed massively by that time, and also weather forecasting had changed massively in that time. So we had those advantages. But we just went up, moseyed up just to help people on the way down if we needed. And that's exactly what happened. So we got up to Camp 1, we did okay. Camp 2 and Camp 3, we were doing better than anyone else. And so we had all this oxygen, and I said, on the summit day when all the other guys were going, we said, all right, well, let's keep going until we don't fancy it and then turn around. And luckily, we got to the summit. It was a far more technical side than the south side. And I actually, on the way down, because I was last up and I was last down, I was with Natemba. We actually slept up in the top camp in the death zone. So, that was an experience as well. Brian Blesser came on the '93 expedition.
Gordon's alive!
He was the absolutely entertainment every night, because in the mess tent you'd be cold, and then we had no satellite phones, or we write a letter home and then you get a runner to take your letter home. Well, I got home before any of my letters got home. So there was no communications for all that time. So he really was the life and soul of the expedition, and I loved him. So on the way back down from the South Col, he was there, and I went across to the Geneva Spur with him roped up. And I just remember thinking, if this guy goes, he's going to take me off, because, he's big. And I just kept saying, please take your time, take your time. And then I thought, if I cut the rope and he goes, nobody would ever know. But I didn't do it, and we both got down safely. In the '98 expedition, as I said, that was my third attempt to get into the North Pole. And in those days, there were several teams trying to get around the world in balloons. You had the Breitling team, Cable and Wireless, Virgin. There was lots of different attempts before they actually finally did it. And one particular day, we were halfway to the North Pole, and it was about -40. And it was pretty misty, and it was cold. I remember a little bit of wind, and it was just cold. And we put the camp up. It was just myself and Runa. He would start doing the cooking, I would do the navigation, which took a long time because you have to heat the GPS up and the batteries and stuff. So I took the position, and the following morning I did the same thing. And what happened was we drifted back that entire previous day's mileage on an ice floe. And I thought, my goodness, we're going to lose this again. And that happened 3 days on the trot. And that time I just thought, oh my goodness, wouldn't it be easy if we were in a hot air balloon or something like that? And I remember as a kid reading this book about Andre, who was this guy back in, I think it was 1887, who attempted to get to the North Pole in a gas balloon, and they landed after a couple of days, and they got back to land and they died. But no one saw them for, they didn't find the bodies for many, many years. So I just thought, I wonder if this is possible. We succeeded in getting to the North Pole '98, and it was a success. But I came back and I thought, well, I wonder. So I talked to a meteorologist, and he said, you know what, it's not the same, but I think we could do it. So that started this ball rolling. So I learned to fly purely and only to get to the North Pole. And from that, I just had this love of ballooning. And there was a lot of synergy between it, because Then there was lots of pilots, but there was no pilots who had had any cold weather experience. And so I did a couple of altitude trips, which was very, very cold. And I just used my altitude experience from that. So it worked out very, very well. And I've still, to this day, got a love for ballooning and aviation. I think some of these expeditions like Everest, you never quite know if your body's going to stay together, and you need luck, you know, and the same with the North Pole, you need luck. But I think there's one or two in there that you would say, barring very bad luck, you know, hopefully you're going to do it. One of those is obviously Kilimanjaro, and the other one is Elbrus, which are probably the easiest of all the 7 summits. And both of those I went with mates. And so it was a great experience, you know, to go to Russia, go to St. Petersburg, fly down, which you couldn't do now. But we went in, and it was a really fabulous time with mates climbing. And Elbrus was just, you know, a plod. But it was a fantastic, you know, great experience. And the same with Kilimanjaro. But what we did in Kilimanjaro, there's 4 of us, and they charge you for each day you're on the mountain. I'm talking about a long time ago. So we figured if we climbed it very quick, we'd have more money for beer. So we climbed this thing stupidly quick. And of course, we all had altitude sickness. Got to the top and scarpered down, but we had lots of beer in the bottom. I was on a mountain with Steve Vincent again in the Alps, and we got into a big thunderstorm, and we were very, very lucky to get off of the mountain with that storm. And on another mountain the same night, a very good friend of mine died in the same storm. So we were very, very, very lucky. And you know, sailing, I've been in a couple horrible storms sailing, and I've had some tricky moments flying. But, you know, you do need a lot of luck, and I think hopefully someone's looking down on me, and I've been lucky up to now.
What is the most stupid thing you've attempted? Might not even be climbing.
Yeah, I can tell you there's been a lot of those. There's so many I can't name them all. One of the most enjoyable ones actually was with Bear Grylls. Bear said to me, the altitude for a black tie dinner is at base camp, which was 18,000. Neither of us got the time, so how about doing a black tie dinner in a basket, in a hot air balloon basket? I said, well, that's easy, let's do that.
The table's capsized, mate.
Turned out to be quite a technical feat, because then what we found, we couldn't get it into the basket, so we put a table underneath the basket.
This table's gone turtle.
But then we needed CAA approval and this and that and the other, which we got in the end. So I took off. Bear and this other guy with him had parachutes on, and we were looking at the food. So I took them up. They abseiled down onto the table. And we even had to look at what the food was, because if you dropped a little bit of a potato from 22,000 feet, it's going to kill someone. So, you know, they had these little cut up things to eat. So they abseiled down, ate a 3-course meal, slugged a little bit of wine, and then parachuted off.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go!
Well, that in itself sounds pretty simplistic, but what happened when you get 2 guys of their weight jumping off, the balloon started to go up in concertina because of the weight jumping off, and I went up at a hell of a rate, and I thought, this is going to be interesting, and then I came down at a hell of a rate as well. But of course then I had this steel table on the bottom. So when I landed, I had to get below the basket. This steel table came shooting across the top of the basket. So that would definitely have killed me if I was standing upright. That was a great trip, and beer was fantastic fun.
Hempy, still up in the air. Here's to you, buddy. Hey!
When I was starting off, it was a part-time. I never made a salary out of a venture. But I do understand why people do that. You know, it's not a criticism, everyone to their own. When I started off, I had to use Morse code. Now you open up a sat phone. And, you know, I had a big old camera. Now you can send stuff back on satellite phones for social media. So I think there's a move with the times, as we said about climbing Everest. When I'm on a mountain, I just want to be on the mountain. I never take any music with me either. And I don't take a book. And when I'm on an expedition, I won't let anyone else read a book. I just say, look, you know, this is an expedition. You know, you're not taking a book. But things, you know, I just got to accept other people do it differently. But I think the problem we have, and this isn't everyone, but some people don't learn the basics. And so I certainly know of some lads who went to Greenland and they lost their tent in a storm and they died. And they phoned up on their satellite phone for a rescue. Well, because it was a storm, the helicopter couldn't take off and they died. And they didn't have the skill to sort themselves out, which is, you know, a tragedy. And so there's pluses and minuses in that. Whilst you have all this technology, it's not going to save your life sometimes, and you've got to be very, very careful. The Duke of Edinburgh Award is a voluntary award, but my girls, they had to do it, and same with Outward Bound. So I'm very proud. They all did the bronze, silver and gold in Outward Bound, the classic course, and that gave them a love of adventure. And all three I took away when they were young, when they were 15. At 15, they listened to you. After 16, forget it. My middle daughter was the youngest to ski to the North Pole. My youngest was the youngest to ski to the South Pole. My eldest was the youngest to cross Baffin in winter. She's a very, very good pilot, a much better pilot than I am, because she thinks it through, she's very safe, and she's broken a couple of my records, which is a bit, I wasn't expecting that, but there we are. But no, I'm very, very proud of them, and they've got a great attitude. They're not on social media, they just get out and do it for the love of the adventure. My next adventure is getting down the pub. I'm going to take all my mates down and I'm going to tell them to drink this fantastic gin because it's got a great life story behind it. But it's also a great side in that all the money that I raise through it all goes to prostate cancer. Because I've been unbelievably lucky in my life. A couple of my friends haven't been, they've died from prostate cancer. So anything that we can do for that charity is a great plus.
You just listened to my interview of Sir David Hempleman-Adams at the launch of our Explorers Grand Slam gin. I'm Phil Kite from the Adventurous Drinks Company, and you can buy a bottle of the gin on our site and a percentage of the profit will go towards curing prostate cancer.